Facebook, instead of taking it personally that somehow I'm saying Facebook is killing people, do something about misinformation.
Which means by the transitive property, Facebook is killing people. Don't take it personally that the President of the United States is saying that you're a murderer. Instead, stop being a murderer. So the game here is to pretend that vaccine hesitancy is solely the repository of the right. Now, here's the problem. Vaccine hesitancy is not solely the repository of the right. As it turns out, by racial data, Hispanics and blacks are the two racial groups in the United States who are least likely to get the vaccines. Those are also the two racial groups in America that were least likely to have voted Republican in the last election cycle. Okay, so that is not a convincing case that the only people in the United States who are not getting the vaccine are not getting it because of right-wing propaganda. It's also true that a huge number of people who aren't getting the vaccine or who are vaccine skeptical or maybe already had COVID and don't want the vaccine, and maybe a lot of those people live in rural areas. Because one thing that we saw with regard to masking, actually, throughout the pandemic is that people undertook, as you would expect, rational risk assessment. When pandemic numbers went up in people's areas, they started to mask. When the pandemic numbers went down, people started to unmask. Because that, again, is how people act when they are confronted with an actual risk. But the media have an agenda. And the agenda is to suggest that if we could only stop people like Trump from talking, stop people on Fox from talking, if we could just stop all of this, if we could end, quote unquote, COVID misinformation, well, then everybody would get vaxxed. Because human beings don't have agency, obviously. All we have to do is give them the right information from MSNBC and CNN, and then they will get vaxxed. Now, this, of course, ignores a bunch of holes in this theory. Hole number one, as I've mentioned, huge percentages of population that are not Republican are not getting vaxxed. Hole number two in this particular theory is the fact that there are a lot of people who are not getting vaxxed, not because of watching Fox News or because of Donald Trump, but because they do not trust the authorities. And the reason they don't trust the authorities is because the authorities have taken every single position on COVID it is possible to take from the beginning of this pandemic. Dr. Fauci, the great and sainted, was saying, don't mask up. And then he was saying, oh yeah, I lied. You should mask up. Dr. Fauci, the great and sainted, was saying, don't open the schools. And then he's saying, oh, well, you can open the schools. Dr. Fauci, the great and sainted, was saying that once you get the vaccine, you still need to wear a mask. And then he was saying, well, you really don't need to wear a mask anymore. And now he's saying, well, maybe you do need to wear a mask. Maybe there's a great lack of trust in our scientific institutions because they spent all of last summer saying that if you were protesting lockdowns, then you were going to spread COVID and kill everyone. But if you were out there in the streets twerking for George Floyd, then probably you'd be fine. In other words, maybe you lost your systemic trust because you don't deserve the systemic trust of the American people. Now, again, that's not a case against the vaccine. I'm not sure there's anybody on the right who's as pro-vaccine as I am. I've been encouraging people to get the vaccine since literally the first day it was available. I couldn't have been more excited to get the vaccine. I got it. My wife got it. My parents got it. I was pumped about it. I think the vaccine is a medical miracle. I also understand why people don't trust the people who have been saying this sort of stuff. But again, agenda is the only thing that matters here. So manufacture a new COVID crisis. Again, we are not in a position of COVID crisis in the United States. The stats do not bear this out. If there is any sort of crisis in terms of people who are dying, it is a crisis among people who decided not to get vaccinated and then are more likely to die. And they're adults and they get to make those decisions themselves. And as long as they're not overwhelming the hospital system, then we really don't have a public policy answer to that. But the public policy answer for Democrats, of course, is shut down anyone who says stuff we don't like. So here's Mika Brzezinski tearing into Trump and his media allies for vaccine hesitancy. This, of course, is the predicate to the notion that places like Fox News should be deplatformed.
Whether you're talking about David Koresh in Waco or the Jonestown mass suicides or Donald Trump's lies about COVID, people died and people are dying. And they are dying because Donald Trump and his evil allies on cable news and on social media and on Capitol Hill, seems like a very strong word, evil, until you understand just how many people this cult continues to kill.
Okay, I have just a question. You know, by the way, that if Donald Trump had won re-election, it would be Democrats who are engaging in tremendous vaccine hesitancy. You know that's the case, correct? Right? I mean, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were saying they don't trust the process by which Trump developed the vaccine. And then when they entered the White House, then all of a sudden it was, the process is great. Everything's fantastic. We fixed it. MSNBC's Dr. Bedelia says the same thing. It's social media and right-wing TV that are preventing vaccinations. Again, this is just not the case. People are independent actors in the United States. They have the ability to make their own decisions. Typically, it is younger people who are not getting the vaccines, more rural people who are not getting the vaccines because they live in more rural areas. Low-income Black and Hispanic people are not getting the vaccines at rates that really are where they should be. the kind of one-size-fits-all, single-factor analysis, Tucker Carlson says X, therefore people aren't getting the vaccine, ignores the fact that even if you look at Tucker's audience, okay, Tucker might have 4 million people a night watching him. Okay, a huge percentage of those people, by the way, are older and probably vaxxed. But beyond that, the bizarre notion that widespread vaccine hesitancy is solely due to Tucker Carlson or social media, as opposed to all of the other factors mentioned, including some somewhat rational vaccine hesitancy. I'm not saying that I agree with people who are not getting the vaccine, but to pretend that these people are all dullards who don't understand anything about a lot of the people who are not getting the vaccine are like, I already had COVID, it wasn't that bad. A lot of the people who are not getting the vaccine are like, I live in a rural area, I don't have a lot of contact with people. So do I really need the vaccine? Is that like super duper irrational and crazy? I'm not sure it's super duper irrational. I might make a different risk assessment, but I also have respect for other human beings and their ability to assess risk. But because the left believes that everyone can be controlled from above, their conclusion is that if people make a decision different than their decision, it's because they are controlled from above. Therefore, if we just stop those people from controlling people, then we will get our preferred outcome. Here is a doctor on MSNBC making this case.
What I liked about that was released from the Surgeon General is that it's really pointing to the fact that this is everywhere, right? It is the social media amplification in cases where, and it is, sometimes it is influencers that are on cable television, right-leaning cable televisions. But it's also anytime any one of us retweets something that without checking the source, we are adding to that misinformation that's out there. And I think it truly is a whole of society approach.
Okay, meanwhile, Joe Biden, you'll recall over the weekend, he suggested that Facebook was killing people, which was the predicate for a governmental intervention in social media to shut down dissemination of information. Yesterday, he quasi-reversed himself. He didn't really. He said Facebook isn't killing people. It's people on Facebook who are saying bad stuff who are killing people and Facebook letting them. Which means by the transitive property, Facebook is killing people. Here's Joe Biden doing it.
I had just read that on the Facebook pointed out that Facebook, of all the misinformation, 60% of the misinformation came from 12 individuals. That's what the article said. So I was asked that question about what do I think is happening. Facebook isn't killing people. These 12 people are out there giving misinformation. Anyone listening to it is getting hurt by it. It's killing people. It's bad information.
Okay, and Facebook allowing that is killing people. Right? So Facebook isn't killing people, but Facebook is killing people. In fact, says Joe Biden, Facebook shouldn't take it personally when I say they're killing people. They should just do a better job of shutting down all the information I don't like, which may change on a day-by-day basis. But since we run all dissemination of information from the White House via our media allies, we should club social media into doing what we want anyway.
My hope is that Facebook, instead of taking it personally, that somehow I'm saying Facebook is killing people, that they would do something about the misinformation. The outrageous misinformation about the vaccine. That's what I meant.
Don't take it personally that the president of the United States is saying that you're a murderer. Instead, stop being a murderer, says Joe Biden. You can see the manufactured crisis here. And again, it is a media manufactured crisis, is driving the sort of change that Democrats have been wanting for a while, which is restrictions on social media, which is crackdowns on people that they don't particularly like. Meanwhile, and this is really amazing, Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, so she was asked, if it would help stop vaccine hesitancy, would you praise Trump more? Like really, instead of turning this into a partisan issue, why aren't you out there getting Trump to, for example, cut a PSA? Why aren't you out there saying the Trump administration did a wonderful job with this and there is a bipartisan agreement that this is a wonderful vaccine that everybody should get? Wouldn't that be better than, being out there and yelling at Trump and being out there yelling at people who won't take vaccines and telling them that they're fools and morons? Wouldn't that be better? And Jen Psaki's like, we don't need to do any of that. It seems to me your end goal isn't to get more people vaccinated. It seems to me that your end goal is to polarize the constituency here.
Even if the administration doesn't partner with the former president, would it consider highlighting or acknowledging in a greater way his role in creating the vaccines to assure the rural voters who still support President Trump but are hesitant to get the vaccine?
Well, I think do you have data to suggest that that's the issue that's preventing people from getting vaccinated? We've seen almost every former president play a role in putting out a PSA, making sure people understood in the country that the vaccine is safe and effective. We don't believe that requires an embroidered invitation to be a part of.
Okay, but you could just ask Trump to do it. Would that kill you? I mean, the answer is yes, because it's all politics. I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date with all our future content.